Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 456. Saturday morning. Good morning everyone. June the 9th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alrighty, just a note before I get started here on today's news. I've had a couple commenters respond that sometimes they'll hear like a bumping noise or a thud noise in my videos. Which to people who watch my videos on like a home entertainment system through like big speakers and stuff, it's a major thud that they hear. So I've been trying to fix that problem, and so I went out and got some rubber padding, and I put like 4 layers of rubber padding underneath my video camera and also where I set my drink down. And I'm hoping that solved the problem. And now sometimes I'll get too close to the camera and the mic, and that'll cause a poof sound, and that will also leave a thud. And so I'm trying to make sure when I raise my voice, which I often do, that I lean back instead of lean forward when I raise my voice. Otherwise it will, redline the mic and it'll cause a thud sound. So I'm trying to eliminate those things. So let me know if over the next couple days, if you notice that putting the rubber matting down has helped alleviate that problem. And hopefully I can avoid 98% of those thuds. Hopefully all of them, but certainly a lot of the ones that are just from me setting drinks down and just moving around, bumping my knee against the table, whatever. So hopefully that helps. I am working to solve that problem. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I don't know these things. I don't watch my videos. I just record them. Okay, so let's get to the news now. Okay, there's more evidence that the FBI lied to the FISA court. Charles Grassley, is pushing hard to see the 302s, not just on the Flynn issue, but also on the Christopher Steele 302s. And the notes, I guess, is what he's talking about. Steele stated when he was under oath in a UK courtroom the following, that Peter's been stroking us knew he was shopping his dossier to the media. In other words, Christopher Steele saying, hey, Peter's been stroking us knew I was shopping the dossier to the media. That's what he told the court under oath in the UK. He said that the FBI and Peter's been stroking us knew that the information he was giving them was raw data and unverified and should not have relied on that. That's what Christopher Steele said under oath in the UK courtroom. Yet, the FBI did not tell the FISA court any of this, especially the part about Peter's been stroking us shopping the dossier to the media. So Grassley is now calling Rodenstein's bluff. Either you, the FBI, lied to the FISA court, or Steele lied to the FBI and the judge in the civil suit in the UK. Grassley, of course, knows that Steele was not lying to the judge in the UK, nor was he lying to the FBI. Grassley is about 99% sure, just like I am, that the FBI lied to the FISA court. So, Grassley wants the proof. And he is saying that if Steele lied to the FBI, that he should be charged with lying to the FBI. Or someone, possibly Peter's been stroking us, McCabe, Loose Lisa Page, Silly Sally Yates, they lied to the FISA court and others. And all that signed off on them renewals would have known that, including Rodenstein. So, we are about 95% sure now. We always suspected that they lied on the 302s on Flynn. But now it's becoming more obvious that they lied as well on the Steele 302s. And this is why Rodenstein is fighting Grassley so hard. Grassley's been trying to get these 302s every which way he can for the past 5-6 months now. It's been going on. And he's finally fed up. To what length he can go to, what he can do, I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see if this comes out in the IG report. But now we know why Rodenstein doesn't want to produce these 302s from Steele or from Flynn. The text conversations, of which there are 3, produce some pretty good evidence that Peter's been stroking us and Loose Lisa Page knew that they were falsifying 302s on behalf of Andy McCabe. We have the one text message or the one text between Strzok and Page the day before the Flynn interview, where they're both talking about how uneasy they feel, how nervous they are about something that they're about to do. And the very next day is when they do the Flynn interview, and probably knowing they were going to falsify the 302. The issue with Christopher Steele is cut and dry. Christopher Steele has no reason to lie about what he said, and that's what he's been saying since the very beginning. It's the very beginning. In all the court filings and everything, Steele has been consistent about one thing for sure, and that is that the FBI, he didn't dupe the FBI. They knew he was shopping the dossier. They knew he was talking to journalists. They knew he had been to the States and interviewed with journalists. He had been with Glenn Simpson to talk to Mother Jones and Yahoo News and Isikoff and all these people. They were well aware of every bit of that. They also knew, as Steele says, that it was raw intelligence, raw data. He said that. He'd never verified any of it. So the problem that Rodenstein has is he knows if he releases these 302s, it takes you to that fruit of a poison tree argument. Remember, all the things that Uncle Bob the executioner is using as his evidence and the investigation that he took over was all based on evidence produced from what would be fruit of the poison tree. And so, if those 302s were to come out, the entire dossier used to get the FISA warrant will be blown up, and anyone who participated in getting the FISA warrants would be outed in the revelation that would be in those 302s, and they would all be facing serious criminal liability for lying to a FISA court, and that's a lot of people. And in the case of Christopher Steele, it would prove that the FBI, again, knew that they lied to the FISA court, but more importantly, it would prove that, again, that the evidence that was used, whether it's in the Flynn case or whether it's in the dossier or the overall investigation into Trump-Russia collusion or anything else, it all becomes fruit of the poison tree. And we have seen this happen many times in jurisdictions all over the country where they find some corrupt prosecutors or some corrupt law enforcement officials or whatever, and they expose them, and when they do, almost everyone who they prosecuted gets a lawyer, and many of those people get let out of jail because, and a lot of times they don't even bother going through a court hearing. They just say, yep, we know the guy got caught, he was a crooked prosecutor, and he handled your case, we understand that, we've got 5,000 cases backed up, we've looked at your case, we're going to cut you loose. So this is what could happen, and Rodenstein knows that not only would revealing those 302s to Charles Grassley would probably blow up both those situations with Michael Flynn and with the dossier in the FISA court, but would also expose him, Rodenstein himself, because, of course, he signed off on one of the FISA warrants, and he would have known, as would all these people would have known, exactly what they were doing. It was calculated. They didn't accidentally forget to mention this information to the FISA court. They were purposely covering that up. So Rodenstein, in a lot of ways, is not just protecting the DOJ and the FBI and others, he's protecting his own hide. He's up to his eyeballs in this. But Charles Grassley is not backing down. He's not. If you haven't read the most recent letter he sent over to Rodenstein, it's on Last Refuge or Conservative Treehouse. Go over and look at it. The letter's right there. It's clear. Grassley is not backing down. He's not giving up. He wants those 302s, and eventually he will get them. And when he does, that's the end of the road for Uncle Bob the executioner, the Mueller investigation. The whole Russia thing goes collapsing down, the Flynn thing, and a lot of people, all these people who had a hand in altering those 302s, knowingly using the 302s to pressure the White House to fire Flynn, using those to prosecute Flynn, to frame him into admitting that he lied about something, as well as everything having to do with the dossier, the FISA court, the Russia investigation. It all gets wrapped up into these 302s. We also know that Sally Yates, in her former career before she came to Washington, was had been known and was actually more than criticized. That she wasn't like prosecuted or anything, but she was found out to have been picking and choosing notes from 302s, throwing out the stuff she didn't like, only using the stuff she did like, and then creating a new 302 to use in cases. She was chastised, I guess you'd say, for that, and never really prosecuted, but it's a known tactic of Silly Sally Yates. And I would have no doubt that when we get to the bottom of this, when Grassley gets to the bottom of this, we're going to find that it was Silly Sally that directed Peters Ben Strokenis and Andrew McCabe to do this particularly jerry-rigging of the 302s in both the Flynn case. Certainly that's the one she was most involved in, but probably she had a hand in the dossier one as well. So that is something to watch very, very closely. It's something that's been flying under the radar, but if you go read Grassley's most recent letter from, I guess, 2 or 3 days ago when he sent the letter back to Rodenstein about the fact that he's not happy that he hasn't received those 302s and that he hasn't received permission to interview that FBI agent that was in the interview with Michael Flynn and Peters Ben Strokenis, you can see that he's very upset, and he basically says to Rodenstein, I'm going to get it. I am going to get these 302s. You can do it the easy way or the hard way. I'm going to get them. And if I find out that, and he basically suggests in the letter that if it turns out that you were hiding these to hide a crime, you've got a problem, Mr. Rodenstein, and it's called a legal problem. So, yeah, Charles Grassley's taking off the gloves. He's pushing because he knows the truth, just like I do, just like you do. Wow. I'm telling you, my friends, I don't know what it's going to be, but at some point in the next, whenever, within the next 12 months, I would say, some gigantic thing is going to bust this thing wide open. We've got tons and tons of tiny bits of evidence, hard evidence, circumstantial evidence, various types of evidence, whether it's going to be McCabe deciding to, blow the whistle on everybody, a confidential informant, whether it's some document, I don't know what it's going to be. Something is going to blow this thing wide open, and there'll be no doubt there'll have to be a special counsel, a presidential commission, or something, a U.S. attorney who's actually prosecuting. We don't know, but something is going to happen. I'm absolutely 100% certain of that. They are not going to walk, not this time. Too much evidence. Too much evidence. Too big a deal. Too big a deal. Let's move on to the next big story of the last couple days, and that is the indictment and arrest of James A. Wolfe. It's funny because for the past couple months I've been talking about the fact that the Senate Senate Intelligence Committee is the most corrupt committee in the Congress. That is the deep state's key players sit on that committee. And of course I went down the list of the various black hats that are on that committee, including Mr. Burr and all the rest. And that is where Mr. Wolfe, James A. Wolfe, worked. He was like the guy who held the records and did the handling of the witnesses who they would bring in to testify in hearings. He also was the one who was in charge of the documents created during the hearings. That was essentially what he did at his position there at the Senate Intelligence Committee. So with that in mind, here is basically how things played out with Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe was originally questioned on leaks by the FBI on October the 30th, 2017. He lied in that interview. The FBI confronted Wolfe again, confronted him again about 3 months later, and he admitted that he lied in the previous interview with the FBI. So they convened a grand jury on May the 3rd of 2018 and produced a sealed indictment on that day, which was issued on June the 7th, 2018. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that Mr. Wolfe cut a deal of some sort. He agreed, obviously, to, that's the only reason they would seal the indictment. If he did not agree to something to help assist in the investigation, they would have just, okay, well, if you're not going to cooperate, then okay, we got you indicted. We'll set a hearing date, and you'll be arraigned so-and-so a time. Get a lawyer. And we're going to hit you with all the charges. But he probably got a plea down to something like nothing more than just lying to the FBI, and the other crimes, of the leaking crimes, he'll probably get off. That'd be my guess. So anyway, we know that he went to work for the FBI for about 5 months. And what were they doing at that time? They were getting the records of all the people who he had contact with. Most of them journalists, reporters, and a few other people associated with the Senate Intelligence Committee. So by December the 15th of 2017, the FBI was aware of 4 specific journalists and reporters who participated in receiving leaked material. The FBI does not name the reporters yet, but based on the timing of the leaks and the stories that followed and who reported them, we have a pretty good idea of who those 3 reporters that we don't know about were, and of course we know who one of them is for sure. We know that one of the reporters is likely Mana Raju of CNN. We know that another one of those reporters is likely to be Mariana Sotomayor of NBC. We know that another one of those reporters is likely to be Brian Ross of ABC. So there you have CNN, NBC, and ABC. Now, the person we definitely know about because of the indictment, and she's named in the indictment, is Ally Watkins of the New York Times. And, of course, it appears that Ally Watkins of the New York Times had about a 3 or 4 year relationship with Mr. Wolfe. I assume she was his mistress, assuming he may have been married, I don't know. Girlfriend, mistress, whatever. But we know that they've got all the communications. They subpoenaed all her communications. They got them all, and they've got her caught red-handed. Although all she did as a reporter was get information. She's not necessarily in criminal liability. As far as we know, she's not in criminal liability. It's Mr. Wolfe. So, Wolfe is the first one who has been indicted, but likely he will not be the last. Likely he will not be the last. Many people are suggesting that they're also looking at Dan Jones. We know Dan Jones is now working for Confusion GPS to try to prove that the dossier is true. He also is formerly an FBI official. He also formerly worked directly under Diane Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein. And we're now learning that this bust is the result of a special task force set up by Attorney General Sessions to nail the leakers. All the leaks were working to frame a narrative against the Trump administration. So clearly Wolfe was an anti-Trumper, as was his mistress, Ally Watkins, who, before working for the New York Times, worked for left-wing news organizations, Politico, and BuzzFeed. Now, BuzzFeed has already admitted that it knew who Watkins' source was, and they knew about her relationship with Mr. Wolfe. It should also be noted that Wolfe has a bit of a criminal history, including being charged with domestic abuse on June the 25th, 2004, charges filed by his on behalf of his wife. Domestic abuse charge, June 25th, 2004, several other things in his criminal history that should raise some issues. Not sure how he maintained a security clearance for that sensitive position he held. But why should that surprise us? Look at the Iwan brothers. There's also other dirt on Wolfe that will be coming out that we haven't even learned about yet. Stay tuned. Speaking of the Iwan case, it turns out that key evidence has gone missing from the Iwan case. A server belonging to Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz's IT worker was physically stolen from Congress. Physically stolen from Congress, according to 3 FBI investigators. The server with much of the key evidence has gone missing. This is from the IG Inspector General who's looking into the scandal. And he says it was physically stolen. And it should be also noted that Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz is not answering questions. Did you see the little video clip of how fast she scurried down the hallway and out the door when some reporters tried to ask her about it? She's got nothing to say about it. Well, my guess is that they probably looked at, with the DNC server, we just refused to let them look at it. The Rotten Reverend Clinton with her server, she just bleach bitted it, took all of her devices and destroyed them. I mean, if we can do that and get away with it, why bother doing all that? Let's just steal the damn server and throw it in the East River. That's probably what they did. So, if you know the whereabouts of the stolen server, the Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz server, which was actually registered to Iwan's brother, which was a DCCC server, which they know data from it had been transferred to a cloud transfer system, and all sorts of things were going on with that server. That's why it's the #1 key piece of evidence. It's gone missing. If you know anything, give someone a call. Alrighty, maybe they should call CrowdStrike. or Fusion GPS. Okay, the next issue. In the lawsuit brought by Aaron Rich, Seth Rich's brother. Rich's lawyers have subpoenaed the Twitter messages from Assange, WikiLeaks, Kim.com, Cassandra Fairbanks, Roger Stone, Matt Couch, and the Gateway Pundit. That's interesting. If Seth Rich had nothing to do with the WikiLeaks, then why are Rich's attorneys issuing subpoenas to WikiLeaks? This could backfire. What if Assange says, okay, you want the evidence? Here it is. What if Assange turns over the evidence as well as to Kim.com and these other people, which shows that Seth Rich was the one who leaked that stuff, or that the information did not come to WikiLeaks from Russians or Russian sources or anything like that? What if he ends up being forced to essentially reveal the source of those emails and the truth comes out? That's a tricky road you're going down there. We'll keep watching that. The next point. I haven't talked about this at all, but it's worth talking about just for a minute. John Cox of California. The way things work in California, they have a bunch of candidates who run for governor. The top two vote getters are essentially the two that you vote for the actual governor slot. And it's pretty rare, but it happened this time. You actually had a Republican businessman named John Cox who finished in the number 2 position. And therefore, it will be him versus Gavin Newsom, who's a left-wing former liberal mayor of San Francisco, and the former husband of the one chick on Fox 5 or whatever it's called, Kimberly Guilfoyle. That's her former ex-husband. She was a Victoria's Secret model back then when he married her. Now she's had so many face stretches that I'm concerned that at some point they're going to stretch all the skin completely off her face and her entire skull is going to collapse in. But we'll keep watching to see if that happens. Next, let's get back to John Cox. Can he win? Well, he's right now at a 20-point deficit. And but then again, we were told that Trump was at a 20-point deficit too. But there's a couple key issues, and there's one poll. It's an outlier. I don't really believe the poll, but it's only got him down 7 points. I don't really go with outliers. I typically look at aggregates of polls, or if I look at 5 or 6 polls, I drop the highest one and the lowest one and go with an average of the middle. So there's a lot of ways you can look at that. So this is probably an outlier. I don't think he's 7 points. 20 sounds about right. But, you know, there's opening here, and I'm not saying John Cox has a great chance of winning or even a reasonably good chance of winning. He probably doesn't. But he has a chance of winning, and a lot of things can happen in the next 5 months. But there's 2 key issues or 3 key issues that I think he should focus on really hard in California. And, you know, it's funny because over the past couple months, I've mentioned a couple times that, hey, I remember when California was a very red state. Reagan carried California twice. Nixon carried California twice. Schwarzenegger was essentially... he was a Republican in name, but he was a Republican, and he was the governor there. He wasn't really conservative, but he was, by name, a Republican. So you can't totally rule out that could happen. Things are pretty bad in California. But there's 2 or 3 things he should focus on very much. Last year, they had a 12% gas tax increase. 12%. Think about that. A 12% gas tax hike. That was not popular at all. Only about 40% of the people supported it, which means 60% of the people did not support that. And that's still in play. If I were Mr. Cox, I would run on repealing that 12% gas tax. That's the first thing I would run on. Also, California and Gavin Newsom are backing this plan for Medicare for all. Now, they've already gone over the numbers, and they admit, even Newsom and the Democrats admit, they would have to find a lot of money. And the place that they plan on getting that money is from businesses in California. They are looking at a 15% tax increase on businesses. That ain't going to do it. It's going to have to be more like 25. It's going to be a huge tax. But even if it was 15, this is a big issue to run on because people are concerned about their jobs. And they know good and well that when your company gets hit with a 15% tax increase, layoffs are next. There's no growth in the company. all sorts of things that the company would invest in that would be creating jobs like R&D or opening up new markets, expanding the company. These things get put on the shelf when you get hit with a 15% tax increase. It means layoffs. People understand this in California. I would make this a major issue if I were John Cox, and I would go to businesses directly and let them know that he will not be supporting that at all, and that if they want to save that 15% business tax cut, they should get behind him. Not only that, they should help in putting up money to pay for ads saying, hey, we're a business here in California. Mr. Newsom wants to tax us by 15%. We just want you to know that when he does that, we will be laying off people. We will be laying off workers. You want to vote for Mr. Newsom? Go ahead. Your job is on the line. You decide. That's exactly how you run that ad. That's what you do. That's what Mr. Cox should do. I certainly hope the Republican Party out in California is paying attention. Apparently they are, because they were instrumental in getting Mr. Cox as far as he's come. Do not rule out, I'm not predicting it, but do not rule out the possibility that John Cox, if he will give Newsom a run for his money, and he'll finish a hell of a lot better than 20 points behind. I promise you that. He won't lose by 20. The issue that he has to be careful of is the immigration issue. For whatever reason, the majority of Californians, about 60%, still support, this idea of open borders. I assume sanctuary cities and a lot of the more populous centers of Los Angeles and places like that. I'm not sure why. Maybe that can change or trend a different direction between now and Election Day. I don't know, and I have no explanation for it. But he is going to have to soften up his position on immigration there, or else he's going to have to become very effective at making the argument. And my thoughts on it were, man, I would just go try to make the argument. I think it's a good argument. I think you're on the winning side of that argument. And I think there's a lot of people in California who may understand this, but it's probably they don't come out publicly and want to say anything about it, or even tell somebody on the phone how they feel about it honestly, because they don't want the backlash. So if I'm Mr. Cox, I would be careful on that issue, but I would go make the case. The Californians, obviously they need a migrant worker program in California. It's a big agricultural state. They need the migrant workers, but we have a migrant worker federal program. He's got to be very clear about the difference between legal and illegal immigration, and he's got to point out clearly the difference between the two and the advantages and disadvantages of the two. If he can make a rationed argument, yes, he won't get the far left-wing nut jobs, but there's enough independents, moderate Democrats, and Republicans in California that if he plays his cards right and he works these three issues the correct way, he can give Gavin Newsom one hell of a run for his money and scare the hell out of the Democratic Party in California. Okay, so that's basically what we got for this Saturday morning. It's going to be kind of slow for a couple days because everybody's getting ready to dump everything they got on Monday. All the stuff that they don't want us to know about, from the IG report to probably some of these things on these 302s with Flynn, things and such. The things they don't want us to know about are all going to be dropped next week because it's going to be all North Korea all the time. That's what it's going to be. And my thoughts on the North Korean thing, I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you what I think the plan is here. The Kims have a long history. They like to get you into the negotiating table, and then they like to change the rules of the game. Now, maybe things have changed. I know things are a lot worse, and this Kim is in a lot different position than his father and grandfather were in, and he's dealing with a completely different type of person who he knows, he's been told by the Chinese, you've been able to buy off the last 5 American presidents, you, your father, your grandfather. It's not going to work on this guy. This guy is not going to work. Trump's a different animal. So, you're going to have to deal with this guy, plain and simple. And he may hit you. And even against our objections, he will hit you anyway. So, I think it's a new reality for Kim. And maybe he is 100% legit and everything's on the table, including denuclearization. But I just have watched these types of negotiations with North Koreans for too long. I'm very skeptical. And I would not be the least bit surprised, and I'll tell you what I think may happen here. If I think there's a very good chance that Trump wants to get up and walk out of that deal. I really do. For tactical purposes. I think he'll be looking for the first time that Kim Jong-un looks across the table and says something or makes a suggestion other than something that's already been previously agreed on, or if he starts to redefine or move the goalpost, or what his idea of denuclearization actually is. I think anything that Kim Jong-un throws at Trump that Trump sees as a barrier, unlike other American presidents who would sit there and say, okay, well, we'll work with you on that. I mean, how much grain do you want? Do you want $1,000? You want shrink wrap $1,000 bills or $100,000 bills? How many do you want? What's it going to take? I can't afford to look unsuccessful. I can't afford to look bad here. And that's why they would never even have a president hardly ever sit down directly with a North Korean leader. Things are different with Trump. He's a totally different animal in the way he negotiates. It's crazy, but it works. And so I would not be the least bit surprised if Trump has every intention of getting up and walking out of that meeting as a negotiating tactic. Maybe he walks out of the meeting, goes back to his hotel, gives a press conference, say, yeah, well, I was talking to Kim, and then all of a sudden he brought up this, and this is not something, I was told that this situation was already worked out. He was changing the rules of the game. I got up and walked out. See you later. I'm headed back home. And no McDonald's for you, Kim Jong-un. And at which point, Kim would probably, on his hands and knees, his people would probably beg Trump to come back to the table before he left Singapore, and they would pick up, and Kim would probably back down. I think that there's every possibility that is exactly what Trump has in his head. He has already decided he's going to sit down at the table, and the very first time, he wants Kim Jong-un to throw something in the wrench and his spokes like that. He wants it because he wants to get up and walk out and then go give a press conference and say, oh, sorry, we tried. It looks like we'll have to bomb him. I think that that's exactly what he's going to do. That's just my gut instinct. We'll see what happens. It'd be great if Kim sits there and says, yeah, I'm giving up the entire thing, man. It's all whatever you want. We'll give up nukes. We'll reunify. We'll sign a deal to end the war. We'll put Trump Tower right in downtown Pyongyang. What do you want? It's possible, but I just don't see it happening. I think there's going to be a lot of some pretty exciting fireworks coming out of that little meeting there. And it will provide a good cover for all the stuff they don't want us to know about. But I can assure you one thing, regardless of what happens, and we'll talk about what happens this week with the negotiations with Kim. That'll certainly be something we'll talk about this week in the TowerGate video. But I can assure you, my friends, the main course on my plate is the IG report and the deep state coup. That's the main course for me. Everything else is just peripheral news that if it's important, I'll talk about it. But the main thing I focus on, as you know, every day, all day, is the coup d'etat. And there's one other story, if I have time to get to it, that I wanted to talk about. If I can find it, but maybe I'll have to get to it tomorrow. I think I actually took notes on it, but I don't see my notes here, so I may have to do it on another day. Okay, well, I'll get to it on Sunday. Whatever it is. Okay, so that's my thoughts. Don't worry, this upcoming week, my friends, don't worry. I'm going to be covering the IG report, the 702s, the thing that's going on there, the general Spygate, whatever you want to call it, Obamagate, Tower, whatever you want to call it. I'll be. That's my primary focus. It will be all next week. The North Korea thing is not going to bump me off my, my soapbox. I'm going to be right here, front and center, doing that. But we will cover North Korea. But it's not going to work. They're not going to get me off the story by hiding it behind the North Korean talks or anything like that. It's still going to be the primary focus of what I'll be into next week. It's going to be a very big week for news next week. So we'll get through it, and we'll see what happens. Remember, the IG report coming out on Thursday, Trump's birthday, the 14th. The following Monday, we have Horowitz speaking, and so we'll be on top of every bit of it, and we will see what happens. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys enjoy your Saturday, and I'll see you back Sunday morning. Bye.